Welcome to the Researching Practice, Introducing the Theory of Practice Architectures vodcast. My name is Máirín Glenn, and I am here today with the originator of the theory of practice architectures, Stephen Kemmis. So this is episode 3, which is entitled 5 Traditions in the Study of Practice. Stephen will explore the study of practice from both an insider's and outsider's perspective. So, Stephen, I'll hand over to you.
It's one of the things that's interesting to me about practice is that it's always been seen differently by different kinds of people doing different kinds of research on practice. And so the way we see practice has influenced whole traditions of research about practice. And so I'm just going to do a quick skim through some of the ways people have seen practice. Some people, when they look at practice, see an individual doing things. Other people, when they study practice, see groups doing things. Some people take the perspective when they do research, which is the so-called objective perspective, and others take a subjective perspective. I'll explain those a little bit more. So if you see it as an individual behavior, you're looking at it from the outside like a behaviorist psychologist and some cognitivist psychologists. If you see it as social behavior, you might look at it like a functionalist sociologist, and you're still seeing it as an outsider to the practice, as an external observer. But you can also see practice as intentional action from an insider perspective, what that person thinks they're doing. And you can also see it as a social formation, a social event, and practices you can see as socially structured that are shaped by discourses and traditions. And some people see practices as both individual and social, and as objective and subjective. And so that's a more comprehensive view of practice, and that's the view of practice that I've tried to take myself. So different people who take different views of practices research them in different ways. So if you see it as an object in an objective sort of way, you're looking at how spectators sees the individual. If you see it in a social way, you're using those observational techniques and social measurements and so on. And you're seeing how, as a spectator, how groups act and interact. If you see it in the individual subjective perspective, you use interpretive methods, clinical analysis, and so on, and you're trying to find out what participants say and think they're doing. And if you see it as socially structured, shaped by discourses and traditions, you're thinking about how those practices have been shaped by discourses like, for example, the discourse of progressive education and traditions of progressive education. These things shape the way we do things around here. But I'm inclined to want to see them from all of those 4 different perspectives and take multiple perspectives into account. And if I had my preferences when I was studying practices, I'd want to think, how do spectators see people here in this classroom, for example? How does a spectator see these groups interacting? What do participants think they're doing in the classroom? Let's interview them and find out what sort of discourses and traditions are shaping what they do. I'm trying to put those together in a more holistic view that sees practice as socially and historically constituted and as reconstituted by human agency and social action by participants, which is a view like a view of the view of critical participatory action research, for example.
So, Stephen, can I ask you a question just before you conclude? What about the ordinary person in the, say, for example, because I'm from a teaching background, what about the ordinary teacher in the classroom who wants to do a little bit of research on their own practice? Is this for them, or is it only for really formal academic research, would you say?
Well, you could say it's only for really formal academic research, but when I say that, when those boxes, I've put those boxes on top of the table there. If you're a teacher, you might want your friend to come into the classroom and tell you what they thought happened and how it went and what were the interesting moments and what did the kids like and not like. So you have that spectator coming in and telling you about your behavior, or telling you about the behavior of the whole class, the social, telling you about how the whole group interacted. But as a teacher, you might also say, I want to know, this is what I thought was going on. Now let me talk to some of the kids, or even let me get some of the kids to interview each other, and they can tell us what they thought was going on at different moments in the class. For example, if you gave them a series of photographs taken through the class and say, what was happening here, what was happening here? And you find a completely different perspective on what was going on. And in relation to that, the fourth tradition, you might be thinking about, we're talking the language of the science classroom at the moment. We're talking about chemistry or something. And we're trying to do a kind of, we're trying to follow a constructivist view of teaching chemistry. And so these are the discourses and traditions that are informing what's going on when I'm doing that. Now, I think that a regular teacher, an ordinary person, somebody thinking about everyday life, can think about those kinds of things. Although, of course, people who devote their whole lives to studying practice maybe have more sophisticated views about it. But when you put all that together, you're saying down there in the bottom right-hand corner, how is this practice constituted? It's moving through history, it's changing as people change. It's not always staying the same. And the point is not to have a true statement about each of those first four things, because we know that the next class, the next chemistry class, is going to have moved on. Things are going to be different. I'm going to be doing things differently in the light of what I learned last time. And so we know that it's dynamic, that it's not all just a butterfly fixed and wriggling on a pin, as T.S. Eliot said. Is that all right?
Yes, that's great. Yeah, and I've just one little question. So how would you tie this in with what you were talking about in the previous episode about practices in terms of saying, doing, sayings, doings, and relatings, and how they hang together?
We'll come on to more of that, by the way. But you can look at, when you're looking at what the individual person is doing, acting, you can say, what are they doing? What are they saying? How are they relating to others? And, that'll work for all of those boxes, 1 to 4. You can talk about what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're relating. And those things, as we'll see in later episodes, also help to hold together a picture of a practice as a complicated thing, but nevertheless, something ordinary, everyday, that we are part of all the time.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Stephen, for exploring ideas around 5 traditions in the study of practice. So the next episode here is episode 4 and is entitled Practices Happen in 3 Dimensions of Intersubjective Space. Stephen will explain how practice architectures are combinations of the cultural discursive, material economic, and social political arrangements that enable and constrain practices, arrangements that are to be found in or brought to the site. So thank you for watching episode 3 of Researching Practice, Introducing the Theory of Practice Architectures. You may access these vodcasts via YouTube on the link below, or at www.stephenkemmis.com or at www.eari.ie. So see you next time.
See you next time.